In 2005, my family adopted our daughter from China when she was 11 months old. When I talk, I'll tell you about how that came to be. But while I waited for the referral, it was about 9 months, which I thought was kind of ironic, that we waited. But while we were waiting, one of the things I thought a lot about was not just her mother, but all the mothers in China who are forced to abandon their baby daughters. There's really no information about those women. A couple really good books have been written, but really just a couple, because it's illegal to keep the baby girls. I'll go into more detail, as I said later, and it's illegal to abandon them. And so women who do this aren't very outspoken about it for fear of repercussion. And so I began to imagine who this, in my opinion, very brave woman was, who on a night in September took her 5-month-old daughter and dressed her in matching clothes and put her in a box and left her on the steps of an orphanage. And I imagined many scenarios of who Annabelle, also known as Lu Fujing in China, of who her mother might be, her birth mother. And when I decided to write a book about Chinese adoption, I followed 6 families in the United States, but also 6 women in China, sort of creating the scenarios I imagined during those 9 months of waiting. And I kind of vetted my stories with the woman who is from China, who ran our adoption agency, as well as a Chinese college student who lived with us. I had come up with 10 scenarios. 2, they actually laughed, they thought they were absurd. That left me with 8 to choose, and I chose the ones that worked fictionally best for me. And I'm going to read one of those. Again, it started out as, a mother imagining her daughter's arrival at the orphanage. And can I turn this light on? Thanks. Annabelle is from Hunan, China, and so all of the stories take place in Hunan because that's the province I've traveled to several times. Who will get this baby? Wang Cheng asks out loud. Who will take her in and cherish her? She lifts her baby daughter to her breast and guides the nipple to the child's mouth. This baby is slow to suck, as if she knows her fate. Chun wills herself to keep such thoughts from her mind. It is all Yuan, destiny. To think of her daughter's fate will not change it. Hadn't her mother told her, the sky does not make dead-end streets for people? Hadn't her husband said, when the first pain began just 5 days ago, remember, Chun, we can have many more babies if we must? Hadn't he told her this morning as she set out from their home with this baby in the sling, bouncing gently against her hip and still swollen stomach, remember, Chun, a girl is like water you pour out? And hadn't she nodded when he said this, as if she agreed with him, as if she too believed a daughter was just water that you poured out and let flow away? The child's sucking is lackluster and weak, and for an instant Chun's heart lifts. Perhaps this baby is sickly. Perhaps her weak sucking is a sign that she will not live long. Chun almost smiles at the idea. If she is going to lose her daughter anyway, wouldn't it be easier now at only 5 days old? But then, as if the baby reads Chun's thoughts, she latches onto the nipple hard and begins to suck noisily, voraciously. The baby lifts her eyes toward Chun, eyes that until this moment have not focused on anything. Instead, they have been cloudy and half shut, like a kitten's. Now the baby settles her solemn gaze right on Chun's face and sucks the milk from her breast hard, as if to say, no, mother, I am here to stay. Chun wants to look away from her daughter, but she cannot. Their eyes, mothers and daughters, stay locked until the baby has her fill. She hiccups softly, then her jaw goes slack without dropping the nipple completely. It seems she does not want to let go. You must, Chun says softly. You must let go. She intends these words for her infant daughter, but somehow she seems to be speaking them to herself. The sun is setting, turning the sky a beautiful lavender, the clouds violet and magenta and gray-blue. Chun has not allowed herself to call this baby anything, but now she leans forward and kisses the top of her daughter's head, and as she does so, she whispers, Jia, colorful clouds. Then Chun takes the now sleeping baby and settles her into the basket. She places the cotton blanket over her snugly, being sure to tuck it in tight. The basket is of a type particular to her village. Someone who knows her village, who has traveled the 7 hours down the back roads, past fields of kale, would recognize this basket. They would see this sleeping baby in this particular basket and know where she came from. The blanket, too, might provide a clue. It is made of pieces of Chun's own clothing with fabric bought in her village. The purple and navy blue cotton had been her own pants and tunic. She'd cut them carefully into squares and sewed those squares together the day after the baby was born, knowing what she would have to do. But a person who had visited her village might be able to say that yes, this fabric came from there. Chun chides herself for her sentimentality. It is a bad idea to leave clues. Her very own neighbor was recently caught leaving an infant daughter in this very city where Chun now stands, staring down at Xia. This neighbor brought the baby right up to the door of the social institution, leaving her in a box that had held melons sold in the village market. She had placed the baby there at sunrise, then stood half hidden behind cars parked in the yard. When the head of the institution arrived for work, she saw the woman there and said sternly, "You, what are you doing in this yard?" Of course, the neighbor tried to run, but either fear or guilt kept her there, frozen to that spot behind the cars, crouched and trembling. "You do know," the woman said, "that I am legally obliged to call the police if you have left something here." Her eyes darted to the doorway where the box sat with the baby inside. "Is that yours?" the woman said, her voice kinder now. "I will turn around, and when I look in your direction again, you and your belongings should be gone." The woman did just that. She turned around and waited several minutes. Chun's neighbor ran to the door and took her daughter from the box that had held melons and fled that yard. What else could she do? Chun's husband asked her when she told him this story, which the neighbor herself had told Chun, and Chun had answered nothing. There was nothing to do. She did not tell her husband the rest of the story. "What have we learned from this?" Chun's husband had asked her. She shook her head. "Number 1, he said, leave the child when it is dark. Number 2, walk away. Number 3, do not go directly to the social institution." Chun said, "Number 4. "Number 4? her husband asked, confused. "Number 4, Chun said, do not love the child." Darkness has fallen. It is time. Chun lifts the basket carefully so as not to wake Xia. She emerges from the cluster of trees at the edge of the park and walks across the grass past the abundant flowers to the pavilion. Tomorrow is the first day of the flower festival, and this now empty park will be filled with people. Someone is sure to find this basket from the distant village with the baby girl inside, and when they see this precious gift, that person will surely take her to the appropriate place. Chun has been told not to wait to be certain this happens. Her husband has warned her to walk away, but the night is so dark and the basket looks so small that Chun finds she cannot leave. She stands in the dark, silent park, hesitant. Would it be so terrible to go back to that cluster of trees and wait there? From that place she can see the pavilion. She will be able to see a person emerge with the basket that holds her daughter. She will not have to tell her husband that she has done this. She can simply say the long walk made her weary and that she slept before heading back home. Satisfied with her plan, Chun walks back past the flowers, across the grass to the cluster of trees. She takes the sling that had just a few hours ago held her newborn daughter and rolls it up like a pillow to put beneath her head. As she looks upward, the leaves make a pattern like lace against the sky. Chun stares at the pattern and thinks of how she does not ever want to make this journey again. She jolts awake. She sits up, her heart beating hard. Even though it is not quite dawn, trucks have pulled into the park. Chun stumbles to her feet. Her mouth is dry and foul tasting. Her breasts are heavy with milk. She puts her hand to her chest, as if that small gesture can stop the pounding of her heart. Men in orange work clothes emerge from the trucks and begin unloading chairs, swaths of cloth, equipment. They move toward the pavilion, their figures slowly illuminated in the rising sun. Then Chun hears the sound of excited voices, and one of the men lifts her basket high, like he has won a prize, and hands it down to the men, and Jia is lost in a blur of orange. Chun waits, unsure of what to do. Then she turns from the park and walks north toward home with quick, determined steps. Who'll get my baby? Wang Chun asks out loud. Who'll take her in? Who'll cherish her? Of course she has no answers. Only a mother can love a baby the right way. Only a mother truly cherishes her children. Something in her wants to go back and shout, "That is my daughter, she is mine." But Wang Chun keeps moving steadily away. Thank you.
I'm going to tell you very briefly about the Roving Tree. It is the story of a 5-year-old Haitian girl adopted by a very wealthy white American family. And this takes place in the early 60s at the height of the civil rights movement. I am going to read 2 passages that are pivotal in Iris's development as she goes through her journey in life. The first passage deals with Iris and her identity crisis. To help her cope with the problems that she's been facing, her adopted parents take her to a psychiatrist, and here's an excerpt of a conversation between them. Dr. Connelly looked like some of the professors at the university where Mom taught. He wore brown corduroy pants, a plaid shirt, and a brown tweed jacket with patches on the elbows. His gray hair matched his beard. His eyeglasses were perched on the tip of his nose. He sat in a black leather chair behind a desk and held a pad and pen in his hand. You told me over the phone that you adopted Iris when she was 5, is that right? Yes, answered Mom. Where's she from again? Haiti, Dad answered this time. Dr. Connelly wrote on a yellow pad. That's where Papa Doc is, right? He raised his head. Correct, said Dad, nodding. Iris, Dr. Connelly turned to me. Tell me how it feels to have a white family. I wondered why he needed to know, and I didn't think it should be any of his concern, so I offered no answer. Turning to Mom and Dad, Dr. Connelly said, it should be expected that a child would be traumatized when she's taken away from her rudimentary living environment, put in an airplane, and brought to live with people who are so different from her in every way. Mom straightened her back and pushed her hair behind her ear. Iris has adjusted to her new life here, she said. And as you can see, she's fully Americanized. But separation and loss may still be an issue, Dr. Connelly explained. I would like to speak with Iris alone. Please wait for her outside. On their way out of the room, Mom smiled at me and Dad touched my shoulder. Are you happy living with the Winstons? Dr. Connelly asked. Yes. What is it like to be with them? Nice. How old are you? 8. Do you miss your Haitian mother? I swallowed hard to get rid of the lump in my throat that wouldn't go away. I had been separated from my natural mother for 3 years and had learned to adjust to life without her. I didn't like to think about her because I became sad whenever I did. I shrugged and looked away from Dr. Connelly, who raised his eyebrows and wrote again on his yellow pad. Can you draw a picture of your family for me, he said? handing me a piece of paper, a pencil, and a box of crayons. A few minutes later, he examined the picture of the red house with 4 people standing in front of it. I had colored in all the faces. Who are these people? Mom, Dad, Cynthia, and me. Why does everyone have a beige face? I shrugged again. Think about it, he said in a soft voice, leaning forward. Seconds went by and I remained silent. Tell me why, he asked in an even softer voice. Because, I ordered, thinking how I could get him to stop asking me questions. What's that behind the house? I don't know. It looks like a moon. It is. Why does it have 2 eyes, a nose, and a mouth? No answer. Do people in Haiti think the moon is a person? Annoyed and close to tears, I mumbled that I didn't know. Dr. Connelly looked at his watch. That's all for today. Think about what you want to tell me about Haiti on your next visit, okay? I walked out of his office relieved, wishing never to have to go back again. Later on in life, Iris experiences some kind of redemption after she learns about family secrets and the circumstances of her birth, and she finally begins to understand and to accept who she is. The pinkish hue of the early morning served as a background for the chirping of birds. Careful not to disturb the stillness of nature, I took off my sandals and sank my feet into the uncut grass, still wet with dew. I breathed the smell of moist earth that reminded me of my childhood. The image of a carefree, barefooted young girl running flashed before my eyes. Then I heard Agat's protective voice telling her to be careful. I realized then that my soul drew energy from the blood in my veins, like the roots of trees draw water from the soil. As I inhaled the earthy fragrance in the air, visions of Agat's casket being covered with dirt came to me, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Despite the distinct experiences that separated us, my mother and I formed an entity connected by silent and invisible ancestral blood. My roots were deep, and I could draw inner strength and spiritual nourishment from them. That realization became the source of a promise to myself to always remain deeply rooted as I continued my quest to reach for the skies. Peddlers walked down a hill with baskets on their heads on their way to the market. Thoughts of my mother continued to occupy my mind, and I remembered throwing away her picture to avoid being reminded of a life I was eager to forget. Overwhelmed with sudden anxiety, I looked across the landscape, hoping to uncover the deepest secrets of the earth and to find communion between the spiritual and the material. The fragrance of the grass and the beauty of the trees softened my heart. Tears that had eluded me for so long rushed to my eyes, emerging from the depth of hidden feelings, liberating me of the anger, sadness, and fear Agat's untimely death had provoked in me. Peering out to the hillside, I examined the earth that had succumbed to erosion. The best of Haitian Mother Earth had been washed to the sea. She stood naked, barren, watching her fruitlessness become a source of hunger and unrest. The sun was partly visible behind the mountains when Marie-Ange and I left for the cemetery. I followed her quick steps until we reached bright blue, hot pink, and lime green gravestones whose architectures resembled the houses that people lived in. This is food and drinks for Bao Samedi, the lord of the cemetery, Marie-Ange explained, pointing at a 4-foot wooden cross where people had left cups of black coffee and cassava pancakes. A few feet away from Agathe's grave, a woman in a white dress poured a coffee libation. I knelt down on a step, believing Agathe's strength had rested in her ability to endure pain. The tears that once flowed from her eyes nourished my soul. The memory of her telling me to go with the Winstons returned and brought forth a river of silent tears that drenched my face. I had finally found the strength I needed to continue my journey despite bewildering images of the past. Thank you.